Darian Mensah officially goes to Miami and puts them right back in the national title discussion.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. What does Duke do now? I mean, I feel for them. I'm going to compare them to a once and future Pac-12 school. Why? Because unfortunately for the Blue Devils, it's kind of fitting. And I feel for them. Also, Big Ten schedules are out, and I have a gripe that is not going away until it gets resolved. This episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Miami just completely saved their 2026 title hopes. There was not a solid backup plan at quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes. I mean, maybe they would have poked around on the guy Duke is probably, they're not assuredly going to get in Winston Eget, but it all came to pass. Darian Mensah will be Miami's starting quarterback. 3 straight years of mercenary guys in the portal. And I'm sure there are folks out there that say, what about high school recruiting? What about developing your own guy in-house? You know what I say? Who cares? You either have a good quarterback or you don't. If he comes from the high school ranks and he sat in your program for several years like Ty Simpson at Alabama, great. That worked out well for the Crimson Tide. Wasn't perfect. I think that had more to do with the team around him than him himself. But was that redundant? Probably a little. You get the point that I was making, though, even though I said him himself. So if you can go out and get a guy that's better than even someone who you like who's a high school quarterback, if you're not doing it, it's malpractice as a coaching staff. So from Cam Ward to Carson Beck to Mensah now making his way to Coral Gables, this is a move that puts Miami back into the national championship discussion. Yes, they lost a couple of really good edge players. As I talked about recently here on the show, they have done a good job with the portal additions that they have made. By the way, they also brought in Barcate, the wide receiver from Duke, who Mensah threw to for the tune of over 1,000 yards this past year. Guy's a veteran, spent some time at the FCS level, but dude can play. So now you've got a supporting staff around Malachi Tony. Now you've got a familiar face for Mensah at quarterback as well. But what Mensah has done over the course of his college career is just keep leveling up. He actually, this is true, could have declared for the NFL draft this year and probably been selected. It's not a particularly strong quarterback draft class, because Dante Moore decided to stay at Oregon. You've got Mendoza coming out, the Heisman winner. He'll be the number 1 overall pick. Congratulations to the Las Vegas Raiders for having the opportunity to screw up Fernando Mendoza. I'm sure they'll find a way. Then you've got Ty Simpson. Anyway, there will be stronger quarterback classes in the coming years. He spent his first season at Tulane as a redshirt. Just hanging out, learning the ropes. Then he wins the starting battle in 2024 and leads Tulane to a wildly successful season. He completes 66% of his passes that year, over 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 6 picks. Really good year. Really good year. Then he goes to a higher level of competition in the ACC. He goes to Duke. And by the way, no, I'm going to save my favorite part of this move. It doesn't have anything to do with Miami specifically, just Mensah in particular. He goes to Duke, leads the Blue Devils to an ACC championship game. Whatever their season looked like in conference play, it was good enough. He didn't just improve, he got wildly more productive, and he had to be. Duke's defense was horrible in 2025. They allowed almost 30 points per game. You threw, if you were a Duke Blue Devil opponent, to the tune of an average of almost 277 yards per game. Awful. Absolutely awful. How'd they win the ACC championship? The answer is Mensah was guiding the offense. Went for almost 4,000 yards, 34 touchdowns, and 6 picks. And by the way, capped it off with a win over the reigning Big 12 champion program, Arizona State Sun Devils. Was it the same team? No. Was it an awesome game? Indeed. Indeed it was. So Mensah increased his completion percentage, his yardage, and his touchdown passes while going up a level of competition and playing, oh, by the way, in the same conference that Miami happens to play in. So this is a great move for Miami. There's no other way to slice it. The backup option wasn't going to be as good. And if you sit back and assess all the quarterbacks that have changed teams, I don't think I'd rank Mensah outside of the top 3 or 4. I think Josh Hoover's got to be in there. I think I might take Mensah over Brendan Sorsby. And I like Brendan Sorsby. Going down to Texas Tech, I think he can do very well. A healthy Sam Leavitt is really good. And for all the discussion and among some fans smack talking that takes place when discussing the Big 12 and the ACC and their level of football versus the SEC or maybe the Big 10, but the SEC is the one that pounds its chest the hardest. Boy, they sure do go after those Big 12 quarterbacks a whole heck of a lot. Big 12, as I said last year, was the best quarterback league in college football. The transfer portal is bearing that out. Mensah, of course, was playing in the ACC. So if you're a Miami fan, you're stoked because with the portal moves you've made, the way that Mario Cristobal has recruited over the last couple of years, and the proof of concept that they just had, bringing back their entire staff, offensive and defensive coordinators going into 2026, I fully expect Miami to be the favorite in the ACC. When I put together my ACC power rankings, barring drastic changes between now and the time that rolls around here on the show in June, July-ish, sometime post-spring football, that is. And the Hurricanes are as capable of winning the ACC as anybody. Here's my favorite part, though. I kid you not. By the way, for all of you who think that I'm a Miami hater, explain the first 7 minutes and 45 seconds of this show. My favorite part is there is an NFL scheduling component. It's happening by accident, but it is going to happen again. So Mensah plays for 2 years at Tulane. One is a redshirt, one is the starter. And he thrives in that system under then head coach, wait for it, John Summerall. Led Tulane to the American Conference Championship game. And then he goes to Duke. And Duke happened to have played a road game at Tulane this past year. Tulane won the football game, by the way. Remember when I was talking about group of 5 resumes throughout the year? I got some pushback from folks saying, so what, they beat Duke. You mean the ACC champs? Yeah. Anyway, what happened in that game was exciting. Very exciting. It had a fascinating discussion to it because of Mensah's return. And what do you know? Miami is hosting, but his former teammates will be over there. Miami hosts Duke on Saturday, November 14th. I'd want to be at Hard Rock Stadium. That's pull up the popcorn and watch the cinema sort of deal, because Duke, of course, didn't want him to go and released the following statement, which is kind of hilarious, quite frankly. Quote from the Duke football official statement. Duke University Athletics and Darian Mensah have reached a resolution that enables both parties to move forward. We are committed to fulfilling all promises and obligations Duke makes to our student athletes when we encounter into contractual agreements with them, and we expect the same in return. Enforcing those agreements is a necessary element of ensuring predictability and structure for athletic programs. It is nonetheless a difficult choice to pursue legal action against a student and teammate. For this reason, we sought to resolve the matter fairly and quickly. Duke remains dedicated to the welfare of all student athletes, and we appreciate them for the talent, dedication, and commitment to excellence they demonstrated both on and off the field. We also remain committed to upholding the integrity of our athletics programs and institutional guidelines. We thank Darian for his contributions to Duke University, end quote. What, talk about the ultimate coach speak. That was a bunch of words. What was said? What was declared? Nothing. Duke's just in a pretty rough spot. But 2 years in a row, Mensah is going to play the team that he just left, and he just left Duke in far more dramatic fashion. I tell you what, they wanted to pay him $4 million a year with the contract he agreed to play for the Blue Devils. He said, no, I'm going to Miami. I bet it's for a healthy chunk of change, therefore. And he's going to go contend for a national championship and then play the team. And, by the way, Manny Diaz was fired to hire Mario Cristobal. Seems to have worked out for the Hurricanes. So, leave your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, however you want to get in touch. But what does Manny Diaz do now?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. The WNBA has released its 2026 schedule featuring a 44-game regular season beginning on Friday, May 8th. The league's historic 30th season includes expansion teams Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo, with opening weekend highlights such as Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever hosting Paige Beckers and the Dallas Wings, and a rematch of the 2025 finals between the Aces and the Mercury. In Unrivaled, Miami felt the breeze as Paige Beckers powered the breeze to a 75-68 win over the Lunar Owls, finishing with 28 points and 7 assists. She was joined by 20-year-old Dominique Malunga, who added 21 points, 8 rebounds, and became just the second player to ever dunk in an unrivaled game. In college hoops, South Carolina handed Vanderbilt its first loss of the season with a dominant 103-74 win. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Unfortunately, I liken to a lesser degree, for sure, what is happening here to Duke to what happened to Oregon State and Washington State at the time they were left behind in the Pac-12. And by the way, July 1st, 2026, the Pac-12 gets officially underway. And this will be the first season. Will there group of 5, group of 6? Group of 6, get used to saying it, everybody. Will that champion get into the college football playoff? That will come up on this very program at some point. But the reason that popped into my head, because of this whole Mensah situation and what's unfolded over the last couple days, Duke has a transfer target in mind who, surprise, surprise, is waiting to hear on a waiver as to whether or not he's going to be able to play. Winston Eget from San Jose State has started the last couple of years, didn't play a ton for 2 of his 5 seasons of college football. Anytime a storyline like that comes up, we have to just inherently mention it's an Indiana type transfer, right? Isn't that the way that this works? It kind of feels like it is. So that's the guy Duke is targeting. Can they win games with him? Yes. Is he as good as Mensah? No. No, he flat out is not. That's why they wanted to keep Darian around and why they'd offered a 2-year, $8 million contract, $4 million per. So the reason that I drew that connection at the start of this segment is that what felt really bad, I'm not going to say the most, but amongst many things, for the programs in Pullman and Corvallis respectively, when all of that went down, is they were starting to make the right moves. They were programs that had been bottom dwellers regularly, that financially were not at the top of that particular conference. They were behind the Oregons and USCs and Washingtons, even the Utahs of the world, but they were starting to make the right sorts of investments. They were extending their coaches. They were making good hires. They were investing in their programs and stadium renovations. They were behind, but they were realizing that the landscape was shifting underneath their feet. And instead of trying to straddle the growing divide underneath them, they jumped over to one side and said, let's go and try and be with everybody else. Even if we're not quite as big, strong, and fast, I'd rather be on this side of the island and the growing chasm than on the other side. And so when that happened, it just kind of was piling on to how bad I and many others felt over that entire situation, because I said, man, I want schools to care. I want schools to be invested. I want them to tap whatever avenues of alumni that they have or that they can go to try to find the money. You can not like any part of college football today. There are plenty of things to dislike about it. I think there are far more things to like, of course. That's why I'm hosting, as you can see over here on YouTube, that's why I'm hosting the Locked On College Football Show. Because there are far more great things and situations can and have improved before. But if you don't like NIL, or you don't like the portal, or you don't like revenue sharing, that's your right to do that. And I understand for the traditionalists out there why you don't. The reality is if you're not competitive in those spaces, the ability to be competitive on the field is pretty low. And though their brand is really weak, Indiana has one of the biggest alumni bases in the world. And obviously they've tapped into it. As I discussed yesterday on the show, they've suddenly gotten Mark Cuban involved. Well, those are the sorts of levers you pull. If you're Texas Tech, you get Cody Campbell involved. Oregon didn't put a stiff arm to Phil Knight's involvement with the university, and however many other examples there are across the country, except for Rutgers, which is like $500 million in the hole or so, apparently. I mean, yikes, the grass is not always greener when you leave a conference. Rutgers should have either worked to keep the Big East together or just stayed or gone to the ACC. Anyway, that's not what I'm here to discuss. Duke was making that sort of commitment. Here's a non-traditional football power that looked across town or across the state in Chapel Hill and saw whether you thought Bill Belichick was going to work or not, it was a sign North Carolina was trying to be serious about football, or that they were trying to inject life, juice, or seriousness or real coaching into their program. Now, they made the absolute wrong hire, let's be clear. I don't think the move was simply a PR stunt. Even if it was, though, that's still an attempt to get yourself on the psyche and in the minds of the college football public, including, but not limited to, high school and transfer portal recruits. And so they looked at that and said, well, we can't let North Carolina get serious, even though we're both traditionally basketball schools, and both are great at that, of course. We can't let them be serious and committed and trying to win, and we just sit here. So here's a guy, Chris Collinsworth voice, that we can go get. Let's give him a 2-year deal. Let's make an investment, and let's pay him top of the market money. $4 million for a starting quarterback, and he was worth every penny this year as they, won the ACC. That's the sort of investment that I want to see from schools. I want them to swing for the fences, try and punch above their weight, get players you don't expect them to be able to get. Brendan Sorsby considered LSU. He went to Texas Tech instead. That's good for the sport, that he doesn't automatically go to Louisiana State. That he says, no, I want to be a Red Raider, and I believe in what we can do here in Lubbock after a Big 12 championship season and college football playoff appearance. That's a good thing for the sport on the whole. And Duke made that correct sort of commitment and found real money, not just the money that they could find. You know, John Mateer, before he left Washington State to go to Oklahoma, saw a presentation, and the Coug faithful up in Pullman with then head coach Jake Dickert made a pitch to him to give him the money they were able to put together. There was considerable work that went into that. And this is a battle Kirby Moore, now the head coach, former OC at Missouri, is going to have to fight. It's an uphill battle because they made a pitch with everything they could put together of about $1 million for him. And guess what? It wasn't enough. Duke didn't make an offer here of $1 million. $4 million for a quarterback, that's tier 1 quarterback money. You can count on 2 hands, maybe even 1, probably 2, the number of guys in college football who are making that amount of money or more. Mensah is obviously one of them. I would imagine Dante Moore at Oregon's in there, Levitt at LSU, Sorsby at Texas Tech, Hoover at Indiana, I bet, is in that sort of range. There just aren't that many guys. So that's what I hate about the situation. Do I fault Miami for going and making this happen? Of course not. It was the best thing for the Miami Hurricanes for them to go out and add Darian Mensah because they didn't have a great plan. But this was plan A. Well, plan A has succeeded. You have now put yourself right back in the national championship discussion. I hate it for Duke because they are going to be forced to take a lesser option at quarterback, and coming off a championship season that they could have snowballed into serious momentum, they're going to be a prime regression candidate unless their defense takes a major step forward. And maybe it will. Manny Diaz is a defensive guy. So maybe something else will happen to the Big Ten that I would really like to see, but it hasn't happened yet. And the schedules came out, and there's something that I got to get off my chest. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. There's nothing like being inside an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to for scoring tickets fast. Without the hassle, it puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans. And I can tell you from personal experience, it does indeed give you a lot of advantages. You're going to find the best deals. You're going to get all-in pricing. You're going to know what to expect when you arrive at your event. I've used Game Time to go to college football games, to go to college basketball games, to go to comedy shows. I've had a great experience every time. I've saved money every time. I know because I looked at the seats that I was about to buy on Game Time and I wondered, am I saving money compared? Yep, I was every single time. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Check them out at gametime.co. This episode also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, go Hawks. One last kickoff, go Hawks. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season, go Hawks, officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, that would be Seahawks minus 4.5, riding with the underdog, boo. Boo. We boo people that want to ride Patriots plus 4.5. But if that's you, guess what? I still appreciate you listening to or watching the show. I'm just Seahawks through and through. That's the way cookie crumbles. And if you believe you know how the game's playing out, well, FanDuel.com is there for you. And guess what? If you're a new customer, you bet just $5. You get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Just like that. Make it count. Because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Seahawks, Patriots, I'm not thinking about anything that happened in the past. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I talk about scheduling a lot on this show. The reason I do that is because I feel very strongly that it's one of the biggest issues that prevents college football from being an even better product for you, the fans out there. One of the reasons that we haven't hit our full potential for maximum sport enjoyment for the fan base is that not everyone has played by the same scheduling rules. And for a long time, the ACC and the SEC, because a handful of their schools have rivalries against one another, have played 8 conference games, amongst other reasons. Now, the ACC and the SEC have not just required their schools to play 9 conference games, which is better. We haven't completely removed the late season SEC cupcakes, which I thought was the entire point. They're mostly gone. They're not entirely gone. I don't know what we're doing here, man. Anyway, someone needs to just put me in charge of this. I would make it all better. It would all be better if you would just give me all the power. And notably, nothing has ever gone wrong in history when someone has said that before. So the Big Ten is now actually the only conference that does not require a Power 4 non-conference opponent, making for a collection of 10 Power 4 opponents every single year. Now, let me rephrase that here. Is every Power 4 team the same? Of course not. Is scheduling a really weak Power 4 team inherently or automatically better than scheduling some elite group of 5 teams? Not necessarily. What we have learned this past year, though, is that there is still an inherent advantage that exists at these sorts of places. And it's the principle more than anything else that bugs me. So, Indiana, for instance, 3 years ago at this time, actually, 2024 hadn't begun yet. 2 years ago at this time, putting Indiana as a non-conference schedule game starting in 2026 and 27 would have been seen as putting a cupcake on there. The team that fits that bill at the moment that could completely turn itself around would be Michigan State, who just had a terrible season, fired Jonathan Smith. If you put them on the non-conference, nothing. I mean, what? Michigan State's been terrible. It's been so long since they've been any good. Well, who's to say Pat Fitzgerald won't have them humming along like a well-oiled machine in a couple of years? I'm going to wait and find out. I'm sure many of you will as well. But the Big Ten is making college football that much worse by allowing 5 different schools. Anyone could do it, and kudos to those who haven't. There are 13 Big Ten teams that are not going to receive my ire. Not that they care, but you know what? That's just furthest thing from my mind. I just want people to be aware of this. Indiana, Penn State, Nebraska, Washington, and USC all currently have a non-conference schedule that does not include a Power 4 opponent. It's the very principle of going through and saying we're going to put 3 teams on the schedule that we know we're going to beat. Is there an advantage to it? Of course. Of course there is. Why do you think Alabama hasn't traveled for a non-conference game to the West Coast in I don't even know how long? Because when you have control of your own schedule, which teams shouldn't have, we don't do it in conference play, but we let them do it for the non-conference slate. When you do this, they're going to set it up to make it as advantageous as they possibly can. And it's why when scheduling arrangements are announced, I talked about a couple during the last offseason, when those get announced, they should be commended, they should be lauded, and we should look to examples like Notre Dame and Miami as reasons as to why schools should try and play those sorts of marquee non-conference games. USC actually, and this again, I'm going to emphasize this point every single day until, well, not every day, but every chance that I get here on the show, and my everydayers are just going to have to live with it. This notion, well, you can only schedule games, these schedules are made years in advance. You can't just get out of the games. Yeah, you can. Do you know that USC is going to play a game on August 29th? Do you know who they're playing? Trick question. You don't, because USC doesn't know either. They're still waiting to figure it out because they got rid of the Notre Dame game, which is ridiculous. Even though their Big Ten slate includes home games against Oregon and Washington, a road game at Penn State and at Indiana, and a home game against Ohio State, I am almost certain that USC is going to try and find Cupcake State U. Probably not an FCS. They don't usually roll in that world, but they'll try and put somebody on the schedule that they're going to win against so that they can be 3-0 when they go to Rutgers to begin Big Ten play. Their other non-conference opponents are at home against Fresno State and at home against Louisiana. It is not a good thing for college football that a brand like USC or Indiana, which is the story of college football right now and maybe the greatest story in the history of the sport, or perhaps in all of sports, it is certainly up there for what they've done in the last couple of years. No one is going to watch them or Matt Campbell starting out at Penn State or Matt Rule at Nebraska or Jed Fish in his Washington program as those coaches try to jumpstart those places into the top tier of the Big Ten. They don't have a game worth watching in the first 3 weeks of the season. Washington kind of does with the Apple Cup. I'll watch it. Many of you, I bet, won't. This is not okay. The Big Ten should change it. I don't know that they will, because now they are what the SEC used to be. Best conference in college football. They're just going to sit there and go, what are you going to do? We're the best. You can hate on our strength of schedule for these teams all you want, and I'm going to continue doing it because it's not good for the sport. It's obviously good for those teams. They get the wins. They get the wins. So the Big Ten needs to change that. End of rant. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.